I want to invite you to take a second to appreciate the great gift of speech and what a near miraculous ability it is. We are rational creatures, which is to say that we have thoughts which can correlate to truth or reality. But it doesn't end there, because our thoughts aren't merely trapped within our minds. We can incarnate them in a neutral environment such that we can share them with other rational human beings, and then they can share them and we can compare our thoughts that we might mutually benefit from that exchange. This is what knowledge sharing is, and it's a form of communication that we should all aspire to. And it's one example of how speech and the great power of speech and its potential can be used to benefit your neighbor. But that same power allows us to mislead and manipulate, or to bear false witness. And this is what distinguishes sophistry from debate. Debate is what happens when competing ideas are offered into the neutral incarnate world in the hopes that we can compare them and judge them to certain logical criteria so that we will arrive at some greater understanding of the truth. Sophistry is what happens when someone uses their power to communicate not to help their hearers understand what is true, but to manipulate them in order to achieve their own exclusive ends. So this can be done by using lies or fallacies in a persuasive way so as to win the argument in order to validate their position, or to maybe get elected, or to sell you something that you don't need. It can also be done through abusive measures designed to prevent debate and the meaningful exchange of ideas that will hopefully help us all understand better what is true. And it is this particular variety that is unfortunately very widespread in today's public discourse. It seems that so few of us are capable of mounting a reasonable reply to an argument made against our own beliefs that we would rather just silence the person making that argument than engage them in any meaningful debate. We'd much rather shut down all speech than allow any speech that might compete with our own assumptions and prejudices. And if anything should be called hate speech or hatred of speech, it's this. For example, I was recently accused of spreading hatred simply for proposing the societal benefits of the traditional notion of the family. I offered premises supported by evidence which lead to that conclusion. And inevitably, as all ideas do, my conclusion disagrees with certain conclusions that are fashionable today. But that's the thing about ideas, there will always be alternative ones. But just because an idea doesn't agree with your own beliefs, it doesn't mean that you are being confronted with hatred. What it could mean is that this is an opportunity for you to contribute to an exchange of ideas that would be mutually beneficial for everyone involved. But instead, what we see more and more today is people refusing to contribute to that exchange, instead dissolving into accusations of hatred for anyone that disagrees with them. And by doing so, they betray a contempt for what would have otherwise been an opportunity to seek understanding between two competing ideas. They betray a hatred for speech. Recklessly accusing people of hate speech simply because they disagree with you about something is the actual hate speech, because it's an attempt to oppress that great gift of speech itself. And honestly, where do we get off assuming that someone who has an opinion that competes with our own could only hold that opinion because they hate us? There's simply no grounds on the face of that evidence to conclude that hatred has anything to do with it. There are countless reasons why someone might disapprove of your conclusion, and love, as one of those potential explanations, is just as likely as hatred. For example, I disagree with my children's behavior and the ideas that apparently inform that behavior constantly. And I express that disagreement through discipline and correction, and I do this because I love them and I want them to learn to live in such a way that more closely aligns with what is true and good. As an alternative, for me to simply endorse everything that they do would be a form of neglect and contempt for their well-being. Even if someone concludes that certain behaviors or inclinations are disordered, there's still no grounds to assume that that is based on hatred. Doctors diagnose disorders of health all the time, and it's not because they hate their patients, but because they want to care for them and restore them to health. Nobody wants to be diagnosed with a mental or a physiological disorder. And as much as I wouldn't want to hear a diagnosis like that from my doctor, it doesn't help me to irrationally accuse him of being motivated by hatred for me. So when someone offers ideas which compete with your own, as far as I can tell, you have two options. The first is that you could offer your own ideas back, assuming that you have some kind of insight to share. And this would demonstrate a love for that great gift of speech, as well as for the other person who might benefit from the insights you have. Or you could assume the absolute worst motivation of the other person, which you have no conclusive evidence of, and accuse them of wrongdoing and of hatred in the hopes of preventing that potential meaningful exchange of ideas, thereby revealing your own contempt for communication in itself. And if anything should be called hate speech, I'd say it's that. And this should all be of particular concern to the church, because the church's mission is to proclaim the gospel, to speak an idea. But if competing ideas are more and more disallowed, and the first person to get offended has the right to accuse the other of hatred, then the church's message will only, and the church's activity will only become more and more marginalized. So you might be asking, what do we do about this phenomenon? How do we respond to it? And I'd say the first thing is to oppose it with every breath that we have. We should be defending speech and the ability to communicate as much as possible, especially against the sophists. Secondly, we shouldn't be found guilty of this same kind of contempt for speech. It isn't uncommon, in my experience, to find prominent Catholic clergymen and thinkers who say that we shouldn't talk about certain Catholic doctrines because they might offend people and make them upset. Well, there's no avoiding the fact that the gospel is offensive. It doesn't congratulate us or endorse us in our current condition or behavior. It tells us that we are headed for a fate worse than we can imagine unless we repent. Is that the kind of thing that could hurt some people's feelings? Absolutely. But it's far better to run the risk of hurt feelings if it means that we can redirect them from something far worse. Hey, thanks for watching that. If you enjoyed it, then be sure to like and subscribe for more. And if you want to support the making of content like this, then please consider joining my online community, The Reinforcements. It's kind of like Patreon, but instead of being beholden to a big tech company, it's a website I built entirely myself, so there's no risk of us being censored or shut down or anything like that. There are hundreds of people who have already signed up, and our mission is to renew and reinforce the church. So if that's you, then come check it out. As an added bonus for certain tiers, I will also send you a gift box from Glory and Shine, which is a Catholic, family-owned and operated company. They make bath and body products. They're actually their beard balm I'm supporting, or I'm sporting right now. I'm not just a spokesperson, I'm actually a customer. So even if you don't join the Reinforcements, maybe check them out anyways. Glory and Shine, they're an amazing company.